Well, students, we're going to learn a little bit about how the Bible is structured. Bible comes from biblios in Greek and literally means books. You have a whole library that you're working on. The Bible is a library of books. What are the main sections of the Bible? Well, they are the Old Testament, that are known as the Hebrew Scriptures, and the New Testament, which are the Christian Scriptures. The word testament is a synonym for covenant, which means a solemn vow or agreement between God and people or among the people. The Old Testament is concerned with God's relationship with the Hebrews or the Israelites, also known today as the Jews. The New Testament is concerned with the original covenant, the Old Testament, or the covenant of Sinai, being fulfilled in Jesus the Messiah. So the Old and New Testaments are about our covenant relationship with God. The Old Testament is composed of the Torah or Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, the heart of the Old Testament. The next section is 16 books called the historical books. There are books of religious history and a few historical novellas. In other words, the people, Judith, Tobit, and possibly Esther, may not have been historical figures, but they are awesome representations of men and women of deep faith. The wisdom books are 4 books of poetry and wise saying. And finally, the final 18 books are the prophetic books that record the warnings and promises of Israel's prophets. So now let's look at the history. I'm going to just get out of this and move down into a diagram of the ups and downs of Israel's history. Here we are. So chapter 1 is concerned with something that looks very much like a roller coaster, but this is not fun. Having fun at Six Flags over Georgia or some other amusement park. The up part is when things are going really well, and the down part is when things are getting bad, worse, horrible, okay? The pits, literally. So from Eden, from paradise, you move to Adam and Eve getting kicked out of Eden by their own fault. They just can't ask God for forgiveness. They have to stick to their blaming other people or other beings, and so they cannot remain in paradise under those conditions. Things go from bad to worse, and finally God sends a flood to clean up the world. Then God brings back blessing with Noah and his descendants and the creatures that they preserved in the ark. But their descendants, 10 generations later, decide to build a Tower of Babel. And again, God has to confuse the languages and stop their project because it's not going to help them. Finally, in chapter 12 of the book of Genesis, we meet Abraham, and God has him and Sarah move to the promised land. And so they are promised descendants more numerous than the stars, a land of their own, and a mission to share the truth about God with all the world. Under their great-grandson Joseph, the people come to Egypt looking for food, and at first they are blessed with wonderful territory where they can build their homes, and they stay for over 400 years. But pharaohs come into power that do not know Joseph and the wonderful things he did for Egypt and for the world. And so the Hebrew people, who have grown numerous and are very strong, healthy people, are thrown into slavery. God frees them under Moses, but they end up wandering the desert for 40 years because they will not believe that God is with them when they enter the promised land. Finally, after 40 years, under the leadership of Joshua, they do enter the promised land. But they do conquer 30 different nation states in Israel. However, they have hostile neighbors that create trouble for them, the Philistines being the most famous of those. Finally, under Saul, David, and Solomon, the nation of Israel, the 12 tribes are united as a nation around the time of the year 1000 BC. Under Solomon, the temple in Jerusalem is built. His father David had been able to pacify their enemies. So Solomon enjoyed a time of peace and expansion and wealth. However, due to his heavy taxation and that proposed by his son, there was a split between the 10 northern tribes of Israel and Judah, which remained in the rule of Davidic kings, but only 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. Finally, in 587, something really disastrous happened, and that was the exile in Babylon. They were there in Babylon until 538, when the king of Persia conquered Babylon and let the Jewish people return to Jerusalem and rebuild their beloved temple, which the first temple had been built by Solomon, but destroyed by the Babylonians. So that was another period of relative peace until Alexander the Great in 332 BCE conquered the Holy Land and conquered a great swath of the known world at that time in Near Asia, South Asia, Northeast Africa, the near part of Europe. The worst part was probably the desecration of the temple under one of the Greek rulers, Antiochus IV. The temple was taken back and purified around 164 BCE by the Maccabees. They were successful in defeating Antiochus IV. They had home rule by Jewish leaders for about a century. But later, the leaders squabbled, and so General Pompey, who became an emperor later for Rome, occupied the Holy Land in 63 BCE. Much later, after the time of Jesus' earthly ministry, the second temple was destroyed in 70 CE. The church looks forward to Jesus' spiritual kingdom, and we work in faith, and we wait for the second coming of Christ, while the Jewish people wait for the Messiah of Judaism. We're waiting for the Messiah, some in Judaism for him to come for the first time, according to their faith, and we believe that he is coming for the second time. So this is the historical backdrop of our book and of the Bible.